Excellent. Thank you so much, Ryan. And Brent and all of you, it is a pleasure for Madeline and I to be here with you today. I know the EduCo relationship is somewhat of a brand new baby almost. I think at the most difficult time. And of course, as you all know, all over the world, the pandemic has affected everybody in so many different ways. And I am really, the one thing that I will say is that I am really proud to be part of the Stevens administration on the side of being able to provide options to the students, making sure that they are well taken care of. And so we will go into a lot more detail. Ryan is right, he did forward us some questions ahead of time. So Maddie and I have tried to put together some of the answers for these questions. But I do know that after this event, there will be a lot of questions coming our way still, because the yielding, we still have some time for yielding. And I know with the pandemic and with some of the consulates still fairly being closed, or if they're not closed, they're canceling a lot of the visa interviews. I am sure that the students will have a lot more questions. So I just want you all to know that we are, of course, we'll continue to be here for you. And of course, Ryan and Brent have always been very diligent at providing us your questions and making sure that they receive the answers as well. So just a brief introduction. I'm Dina Escaros. I'm the Director of the Office of Graduate Admissions. Madeline Dennis Yates is the Admissions Advisor in the Office of Graduate Admissions. We are the front-facing office that deals with incoming students all the way from recruitment to bringing them on campus. Then, of course, we hand the baton over to our colleagues in graduate student life, who then take it over from there, as well as some of the other offices, of course, and the schools. So part of what we are, I do want to be sure of, is that we are providing you with information and arming you with details and answers that are coming straight from Stevens Institute of Technology. The questions that Ryan had provided us are, of course, all yielding questions. We're going to go through the admitted what next, which is what does the student have to do right now? We will talk about tuition and fees and scholarships. We will talk about course registration. And of course, we cannot talk about course registrations unless we also talk about enrollment options. We will talk about Workday Student Update. This is a brief update that I will be providing you since Stevens just moved to Workday Student Portal. And also, we will be providing you with some information from our colleagues in graduate student life. So the admitted what next? Essentially, at this point in time, you all have had a very large number of students admitted to Stevens Institute of Technology. I think it probably baffled a lot of people when we are looking at these numbers, because even though it is a very young relationship, the numbers that we are seeing from EduCo, and of course all of you, have been quite high in terms of applications. So that means that, of course, many of your students have been admitted because they did come in qualified. So we want to make sure that we now proceed, as you all know, with confirmation of attendance. We need to know, is the student coming or not? I know that this might be a bit of a trial period or trying period, I should say, in the sense that students are not quite sure what will happen. A lot of them are concerned as to, what if I submit my deposit? What will happen if I don't end up coming to Stevens? So we will talk about that under the enrollment options side of things. But we are urging all students to commit if they are interested. Stevens, just like many other universities or some of the good universities, have seen an enormous increase in applications. This is in addition to those who deferred from last semester to this semester. And so I do want to be sure to alert the students that, especially in programs like computer science or information systems or the business intelligence and analytics programs, they are in very high demand. So we need to be sure and we need to understand who is really serious about coming to Stevens. Now, one of the main things that our office is working on, and I do hope that that will transfer to you all, is to ensure that I-20 documentation is coming in from your students. We know and we understand, yesterday, as I think you probably all know, I had an event for Chinese students that are interested in the School of Engineering and Science. And I do understand that the students have concern about submitting financial documentation when they think that they will not be able to get a visa appointment. We are hopeful. The fall semester is still a ways away. And so we do need to be sure that the students are submitting financial documentation and the financial documentation is up to date. So it cannot be more than, I would say, 4 months old. And is indeed for the full amount, minus any scholarships that the students have received, as long as the student has submitted the deposit to confirm their enrollment. Now, the students need to connect with their academic advisor. Information on who the academic advisor is can be found in the second page of the admission letter. They do need to register for classes once they receive their study plans. And the students will end up receiving their study plans once they obtain an I-20 from Stevens and have submitted their enrollment deposit. So once that happens, I do want to be sure that the student has already also had a conversation with their academic advisor in case there are any questions that, about waivers or prerequisites. And then once they receive their study plan, they should register. Now, we also send out to each of your students the confirmation of attendance form. I do want to be sure that the students are indeed taking time to complete this form. Even if they do not have their visa appointment yet, I do want to understand that. And now once the students do obtain a visa appointment, they will have the opportunity to edit the confirmation of attendance form. And so they should be doing that as well. Now, the students should be connecting with current and other prospective students on social media. And as a matter of fact, we also, just like you all, we run calling campaigns from current students. I do want to be sure that the students are picking up the phone so that they can obtain information from other students on where to live, where do they live, how did they find their apartments, how do they like Stevens, what food places are better than others, what happened when they first landed at the airport, things like that. Now, of course, also, we will talk about this as well, but the Office of Graduate Student Life has a wonderful service for our graduate students, which is the airport pickup and temporary housing. And we will go into more detail about that, but the students should understand that they must complete the form if they want to take advantage of those two services. The other thing they need to do is learn who is who on campus. I know the Office of Graduate Admissions is the front-facing office and is always happy to answer a lot of questions for students. But we must understand that there are questions that we cannot answer. We are not DSOs, and so we are not able to technically answer any questions about I-20s or about visa documentation. Now, I used to be a DSO in my past life, so I'm happy to talk to students, but I do believe that the International Student and Scholar Services Office must also be given the respect, of course, of being able to provide the answers that they see fit to the students when it comes to visas. Now let's talk about tuition and fees and scholarships. The tuition at Stevens is for the full-time rate, as of course you all already know. Your students are all international students. every single international student has to be a full-time student unless they are in their last semester at the university. And of course, they don't still have the requirements to complete their program. So tuition at Stevens is only paid for the semester that the student is registered, which means that we charge on a semester basis. Now, the full-time tuition is for 9 credits, but at Stevens, we allow students to take up to 12 credits for the same cost. The tuition is $19,038. Now, of course, many of you, I have looked up some of the records, and your students already have scholarships. Those scholarships are through the Provost Master's scholarships. And with the scholarships, the students are able to deduct half of that scholarship amount for the first semester and then half for the second semester. So if a student received an $8,000 scholarship, wonderful, this is great news. They would be able to deduct $4,000 from the fall semester and $4,000 from the spring semester. So when they pay their tuition, they will be paying the $19,038 minus the $4,000 for each semester. Now, during the last semester, if a student is part-time, meaning that they 6 credits or less, or anything I suppose less than 9 credits, we in the School of Business, we do have some 1 credit courses. So if they are registered for 6 credits, for example, they will only be paying the per credit rate for that last semester. Now, a lot of our programs are anywhere between 30 to 36 credit hours, with the exception of the MBA programs, of course. So the 30 to 36 credit hours, the students can then divide them on however they want on the semesters. So they can enroll in 9 credits in the first semester, 12 credits in the second semester. That makes 21 credits, I think. No, I don't know. You guys do the math. And then for the last semester, they would do the rest. And again, if they register for anything between 9 to 12 credits, it will be the same cost. Now, we do also have mandatory fees. Those mandatory fees are the general service fee, which is for full-time students is $568. And the student's activity fee, which is $172, and those are paid on the per credit base, on the per semester basis. Now, student health insurance, we will talk about that as well. Of course, with the trying times that we are in, you all know that medical attention in the United States is very expensive. So I do want to be sure that the students understand that they should only truly, and we will only truly waive the health insurance fee if their current insurance that they have is at least equivalent to the insurance that we offer. Now, let's talk about some of the student accounts items. For student accounts, electronic payments can be submitted through the e-billing on the student's MyStevens. And now, once the student registers, they will receive their invoice, and that bill is through their MyStevens account. So what that means is that if a student is not registered, they will not see a bill. We do not actually mail invoices or bills to students because the students does have the obligation to go onto their MyStevens and obtain it from there. International students can pay their tuition and fees through wire transfer through Flywire. Now this is, they will have to create an account with Flywire, of course, and be able to send the money through there. The only thing that I am going to say about this is please make sure that the students student ID, which is their CWID, and their full name as it appears on their application is properly indicated on the wire transfer. Otherwise, the university does not know who to allocate this to. We do have a payment plan at Stevens, and students can partake in this payment plan. I do understand that some students, their parents perhaps get paid on a monthly basis. And so the students will have an opportunity to sign up for this payment plan. They can pay anywhere between 4 and 5 installments. They do have to sign up for it. I believe there's a cost of about $75 to take advantage of the payment plan. Now, we talked about medical insurance, but what I do want to say is that if a student wants to waive out of medical insurance, they will need to log on to www.stevens.edu/health-insurance so that they can see there what we require or what we offer the students through our medical insurance. And if a student feels that the medical insurance they have is equivalent to our medical insurance, they will be able to submit a request through that web page to have their medical insurance waived. Now, it will not be waived unless the student receives an email saying that your medical insurance has been waived and has been deemed equivalent to what Stevens offers. Now, for those of for the students who receive scholarships, the scholarships will be applied to their student record anywhere between the first and second week of the semester. The reason being is that we cannot apply a scholarship to a student's record unless we know that the student is attending. And so this is the catch-all. So that is why we ask the students to pay the bill minus half of the scholarship that they received. And of course, another important office for students to know is the Students' Accounts Office, and they would handle anything that comes to billing. They would handle anything that comes to fees. They would handle anything that comes to wire transfers. And so please make sure that the students are also reaching out to them should they need answers to those questions. Now, the Provost Master scholarships, those are merit-based scholarships, and the students would receive that based on their merit in comparison to the incoming class. Excuse me. So with that, we do want you to please understand, of course, that only the top candidates will receive this. I know, for example, for computer science, you do have a lot of students in computer science. We will only award it to students who have a CGPA of 8 and above, and have, or have perhaps a GRE score with a quant of 160 and above. So of course, as you know, there's a lot of demand on certain programs like we talked, and the scholarships are not for everybody. It is only based on merit. Now, of course, if you feel that a student has submitted their financial documentation and they're perhaps missing $4,000, I do have a pool of funds that is available as a special scholarship that is need-based. And that I would be able to award to the students once I see the financial documentation and once the ISSS office has deemed it insufficient for a minor amount that they are missing. Scholarship deadlines are very strict. We only have a limited pool of funds for scholarships, which means that once the scholarship deadline comes around, if we don't deem a student that they have a special circumstance and we need to offer them a small extension, once the scholarship deadline comes around, it will be voided. Now, we do not void admission decisions based on lack of payment of the enrollment deposit, but we will void scholarship if a student has not paid the enrollment deposit. The reason being is that we then take these funds and then we reallocate them to other students that, of course, are also equally deserving of those scholarships. RA and TA positions are usually kept for PhD students. However, in the second year that a master's student is on campus, sometimes they are awarded TA positions, especially, I would say, in the School of Business. Those are positions that the students, faculty members who have funds feel that the student has taken perhaps their class and has done really well in their course and has built a connection with their professor. And so they hire them for the second term as a teaching assistant or a grader. On-campus job opportunities are available for international students. In a regular semester, such as fall 19, for example, we had about 1,600 graduate international students hired at Stevens Institute of Technology. Those positions are anywhere from the library to administrative offices, to the schools, to the dining services, and so on and so forth. And so, of course, we desperately need these students, but it is a job just like any other jobs. The students will have to apply, the students will be interviewed, and then a selection process will take place. If a student is selected, they are paid about $12 per hour. They can work up to 20 hours a week during the semester and up to 33 hours a week during the summer. I know that I hire anywhere between 10 and 12 graduate assistants in the Office of Graduate Admissions. And for those students, they make roughly about $3,600 per semester. So while it is not going to be used as part of the financial documentations to obtain an I-20, because the hiring only happens post-arrival to campus, it certainly can go a long way to helping students pay for living expenses. Now, for living expenses, I know this is always on a student's mind. Please understand that the amounts indicated on the financial verification form are indeed estimated amounts and are imposed on us by the Department of Homeland Security. And so these are not the amounts that the students will end up paying. Now, of course, if a student ends up living in Hoboken in a one-bedroom apartment, they can expect to pay $2,500 a month in rent, since Hoboken does tend to be an affluent city. But with that, a student that shares an apartment with 2 or 3 other roommates and lives in the vicinity, such as Jersey City, Union City, and any of these great neighborhoods that are right around us, the student can expect to pay probably about $500 a month in rent. And of course, we are happy to connect your students with our current students so they can obtain more information on the reality of what they pay. Now let's talk about course registration and Workday student update. Please make sure your students are very familiar with the academic calendar at Stevens Institute of Technology. The students can go to the search engine on our website and type in academic calendar in that search engine. And up will be the academic calendar for this academic year that they're looking at. Now, it is very important that they familiarize themselves with dates such as the first day of classes, the date of drop add period, so that, as you all know, the students can drop courses and add courses within that drop add period. They must familiarize themselves with, if they drop a course, when would a W be added to their record, meaning that the course will show on their transcript as having been dropped. They also need to familiarize themselves with the drop add calendar based on tuition. So if a student drops within perhaps, I'm just making this up, but sometimes if a student drops on the 3rd week of classes, they will only perhaps get 75% or 70% of their tuition will be applied to, let's go back on this. If a student drops in the 3rd week of classes, sometimes they will forfeit 75% of their tuition, meaning that if they had paid the tuition and they drop on the 3rd week of classes, as an example, they could very well lose 75% of the tuition they had paid. Now, some students tell us, well, I wasn't familiar with that. This is a requirement, and it is something that all students must be familiar with. Now, if they had not yet paid their tuition and drop in the third week of classes, as you all know, universities in the United States do have collection agencies. And so at a certain period of time, there will be a collection agency after the student for non-payment of their tuition. This is something that is across every single university in the United States, and that's just how they do business here. Now, if you have summer students are encouraged to register right away. And the students can find information on how to register for their courses via this link on Kaltura. Of course, I will be sending this presentation to Ryan and to Brent, and I'm sure they are happy to send it off to you as well. Fall registration will only take place after—
My friend doesn't join.
Fall registration will only take place after the students receive their study plans. So please make sure that the students do not register for courses that they're not supposed to be registering for. Now, I do understand that some of your students are concerned about the enrollment options. If they cannot get a visa to enter the United States, Stevens Institute of Technology will be providing enrollment options. Now, for example, if a student cannot come to Stevens in the fall 2021, I do know that some of the consulates in China, I guess, are still closed. We will have the ability to enroll the student online, just like we did the previous 2 semesters. Now, we don't necessarily want the students to have that expectation from now. The main priority of the student is to try to get a visa and to try to enter the United States. For our Chinese students, I do know that many of my students have already gone to neighboring countries. Some have gone to Singapore, some have gone elsewhere, and they have obtained visa appointments and have obtained visas through there. Now, we talked about the airport pickup and temporary housing services, and then information on permanent housing for your students. When a student arrives in the United States, our Graduate Student Life Office does pick them up from the airport if the student provides the form ahead of time requesting this service. The students are only picked up if they arrive at JFK Airport or Newark Airport. And of course, the students will be required to wear masks. Now, temporary housing is available at the Sheraton Lincoln Harbor Hotel. This is a 5-star hotel in Weehawken, New Jersey, which is about a 5-minute walk from Stevens Institute of Technology. It has an absolutely gorgeous view that is overlooking the skyline of New York City, which is the skyline right behind me. The students do have to pay for $50 per night for a single occupancy room. Now, we used to allow students to stay in double rooms, but because of COVID regulations, now all students stay in single rooms. Please also understand that this is heavily subsidized by Stevens. This hotel runs anywhere between $199 a night to $240 from what we have seen on their website. And so, of course, Stevens highly subsidizes this option for the students, and they use it as a way to have the students in a safe place until they find permanent housing. On-campus housing for graduate students is not available. We do have Stevens leased housing, which is not on campus for graduate students. It is very minimal options are available. And a lot of the students don't like it because it does, of course, cost a lot more since it's located in Hoboken. So permanent housing resources off campus is available on our website. If a student types into the search engine permanent housing resources, they will be able to come up with the entire list of options they have available to them. I know that Stevens also has an app that the students can log on to where apartments are put up for rent. And so the students have the ability to connect with the landlord directly and set up a time to go visit that apartment. And of course, Graduate Student Life is more than happy to assist students at any point in time, should they need to, with perhaps reviewing the leases that they have to sign and so on and so forth. Now, I know that a lot of your students have questions about quarantining. Now, What I do want to tell you is that the quarantine rules in the United States and in the state of New Jersey under the CDC guidelines are changing on a daily basis. I did come into a conversation earlier where Brent and Maddie were talking about vaccinations. The majority of us in New Jersey have already been vaccinated, or I should say not in New Jersey, on campus. So out of my office, I have a staff of 9 people. Currently 7 have either been fully vaccinated with both shots or have received their first vaccination and are scheduled to get their second vaccination very shortly. This means that life will hopefully resume back to normal. I do know that Stevens is working very hard to find a way to vaccinate all of our incoming students. This is very important. Please understand that under the CDC guidelines, not all vaccines are accepted in the United States. And so our concern is that if a student is vaccinated at home, please make sure that it is a vaccine that is recognized in the United States and in the state of New Jersey. At this point in time, the 2 that we are currently working with are Moderna and Pfizer. So I received Moderna, and I do hope that we will have an opportunity to also vaccinate our students once they arrive here, if it is needed, and if they do not have an approved vaccine back in their home country. Now, we do have requirements for students to quarantine if a student comes in without a vaccine. And even if they do come in with a vaccine, there will be a time period where they might need to indeed quarantine after arrival in the United States. Now, the Graduate Student Life Office will be their contact, and they will be sending the students a lot of information on the vaccines and on how to register to be allowed to come to campus, and providing those negative COVID tests, the PCR tests, and so on and so forth. And of course, there are resources for students that they're able to log on to as well to see all the different New Jersey travel advisory regulations and so on and so forth. But with that, I am happy to report that Stevens Institute of Technology is planning on a normal fall semester for all students on campus. And so with that, we are all looking forward to going back to our offices, and the faculty are looking forward to going back to teaching on campus. Now, of course, if any changes happen, we will be notifying the students immediately. But for the time being, please do inform the students that we are planning on a normal on-campus semester. With, of course, life as it will be now, where we will all be required to perhaps wear masks, and we will all be required to often wash our hands and sanitize regularly. Now, every single one of your students will be required to do an orientation upon arrival. And so please know that for the summer, the orientation will be held via Zoom on May 17, 2021 at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The fall schedule of orientation has not come out yet, but once it does, we will be providing it for you. But it is required for all international students. With that, I get to conclude my presentation. One thing that I will tell you is that if your students wish to connect with us directly, or any of our current students, we are happy to connect with them. On the Stevens website, on the graduate admissions, and my colleague Maddie will actually put the link in the chat right now. For the contact us page, each of the graduate admissions staff, including myself, have Zoom office hours where we meet students on a one-on-one basis. And so this is open office hours, as we call it, and the students will be placed in a waiting room. And once I'm done with the current student, I will allow the next student to come into the Zoom room to talk to me. And I do see that Maddie has posted the link there. please encourage your students to connect with us on our Zoom rooms. We are happy to speak to them, and we're happy to facilitate any questions they have with other offices as well. With that, I do know that you will have a lot of questions. I will stop sharing my screen right now, and let's do a Q&A time.
Thank you so much, Dina. I'm just gonna run off with one more, like one specific question right now. In terms of the one-on-one sessions with your team, is it only you and Maddie that we should tell the students to communicate with or have a Zoom meeting with, or would the other team members in the admissions office would also be available?
So everybody in graduate admissions will be available for your students. Now, what I will say is that Maddie is your point of contact. So Maddie knows everything about EduCo there is to know. She probably knows a little too much, but with that, she would, and myself, would certainly be happy to connect with the students, but our Zoom office hours happen at different times. And so if it's more convenient, perhaps, for a student to connect with Kristen Murdoch or Amanda Mendez, who are also directors. Amanda Mendez is the associate director, Kristen Murdoch is an assistant director, or any of the other advisors, they will know how to answer questions that come from your students.
Gotcha. And then just another question. So we've seen a lot of questions on our WhatsApp group regarding the tuition. Could you clarify, because while we were doing the presentation, I did a little bit of a math in terms of the semester charge, which is 19,000 something versus the per credit hour. So just to clarify, either way, if they take nine credit hours or 12 credit hours, the amount would still be the same, which is around 19,000.
That is correct. So we charge the same tuition for anywhere between 9 to 12 credits. So if a student registers for 9 credits, it's the same cost as if they register for 12 credits. Some students do like to take the 12 credits so that they can finish quicker and only do their program in 3 semesters, which is wonderful. My only concern is that I do have 2 concerns. One, if their English is not up to par, for example, or if they need to take the ELC courses when they get here, this might mean that they really should not be registering for a lot of credits, in the sense that they will need time to adapt to the US style of learning. So it is very different from anywhere else. And so we do feel sometimes that when the students come in, if they swamp themselves with 12 credits, they sometimes get lost a little bit and we have to set them back on track. And so ideally, the first semester, the students would register for 9 credits. But after that, they can certainly register for 12 credits and still finish in 3 semesters. Unless, of course, they're in a 36 credit program, at which point in time they will need to register for 12 credits every semester.
Gotcha.
To finish in 3 semesters.
Yeah, that's good. And then one of our team members is asking, what happens to the scholarship if the student decided to defer to the next intake?
So in order for the student to defer, they must pay the enrollment deposit. When they pay the enrollment deposit, it also confirms their scholarship for the upcoming semester. So students at this point in time are only allowed to defer for 1 semester. So if they were accepted to fall 2021, they can defer to spring 2022, and their scholarship will transfer with them as long as their enrollment deposit is paid.
Gotcha. What happens to those who were originally admitted to spring 2021 and then deferred to fall 2021, but due to COVID, they could not travel and would need to defer again?
So we will have to talk about that a little bit more. I know that we honored their scholarships, but since our regulation now is to defer only for 1 semester, Stevens used to allow students to defer for 2 semesters, and this was a bit messy. And so with that, we will be most likely requiring the students to reapply and of course be reconsidered for a scholarship.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you so much. And then I think one more question here from our team is that will the GRE and GMAT be waived for 2022 spring and fall?
We don't have any plans for that. So Stevens never waived GRE scores. And of course, as you know, certain programs are, they take a look at the GRE very heavily, or GMAT. And so at this point in time, there is no plans to waive GRE or GMATs for spring 2022 or fall 2022. As you all know, for fall 21, yes, we do have in place a test optional option, which means that if a student has not taken the GRE or GMAT, we are willing to waive it. But if they have taken it and it is provided on our portal, it will be considered as part of their profile.
Gotcha. I guess one of the things that is important for our team to know is that maybe it's just me or probably some of us haven't really seen a physical copy of the offer letter or admission letter of the students. Dina and Maddie, I just wanted to double check with you. Does the deadline for the deposit is stipulated on the admissions letter?
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
Maddie, did you wish to answer?
No, sure. I was just going to say yes. It will vary student to student because it's more of a, a time frame. It's like a certain amount of days from the admission date. So it will vary student to student.
All right, awesome. Is that based on what I know, or what we know so far? It's actually 30 days upon the admission of the student. Is that still correct?
It's at one point in time, it's 45 days.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, if a student is admitted early enough, it's 45 days from the date of admission. But at a certain point in time, we go to a 30-day time period because, of course, it's a shorter time until we get the students here.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. That's okay. Awesome. And then just to also another clarification is that the students can proceed in requesting for an I-20 even without the admission reply form.
That is correct. They can. So technically what we are telling applicants that are coming into the system now is that to save time, please make sure that the student uploads their financial documentation at the same time that the student is applying, so that once an admit comes into the system, the ISSS office will issue an I-20. Now, I am seeing less financial documentation from your students at this point in time, versus previous students. And I believe China has a lot to do with that. And the students from China, in the sense that they might not be quite ready to submit financial documentation. And so I do want to make sure that we really take this very seriously and that we do go after the students very diligently to make sure that they are uploading financial documentation. It's super important.
Mm-hmm. How about for those students who were admitted but never got a scholarship? Is there a chance for them to appeal and be reconsidered for scholarships?
Only if the student's merit qualifies. Now, what ends up happening is that at a certain period of time, once we void the scholarships that have not been accepted, so for your students who perhaps we were talking about who do not pay the enrollment deposit and their scholarships are voided, we then take this money and we reallocate it. So if you feel that there is a student that is that it really has, is a great student, and we should be considering them for the scholarship, definitely, Brenton, you can certainly come out to us and we will reconsider. Now, I just want to make sure that it is understood that it is merit-based. And so, unless, of course, it's that special scholarship that we talked about earlier, which is like $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. But for the real scholarships, the Provost Master's scholarships, we really need to make sure that the student does have merit. So a 152 quant in the GRE will just not cut it, since our average GRE score for the School of Engineering and Science is around a 163. Mm-hmm. So that is, the quant side. And so it does have to be understood that we do get really high GREs and GMATs. And so, that's going to be important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And since we're already talking about, I know our team still have other questions, but let me just ask one more question regarding scholarship. A lot of the students would also ask about, is there, can I apply immediately for a TA or research assistant position, or maybe a graduate assistantship position before getting on campus? How possible is that?
It's not really possible, because as we talked, those are usually kept for our PhD students. But master students in the second year can certainly apply to, if they have a connection with a faculty member or the school, they can certainly apply then to the school or to the faculty member. RA and TA positions are awarded through the schools, not through graduate admissions. And so it's very important that the student, perhaps for the TA, they need to take the course, they need to do really well on it. And then the faculty member will recognize that this is a student who's done exceptionally well, and they will hire them as teaching assistants.
Mhm.
Ryan, could I?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Dina, go ahead. Finish
No,
your.
no, it's,
I was gonna just ask if you guys could remind us kind of what the standard turnaround time is in terms of when an application is complete, reviewing it for admissions, and then once the financial documents are all approved, what's the standard turnaround time for issuing the I-20? So an
Sure.
unrelated topic, but
Of course. So we have, admissions are usually done within 2 weeks. A lot of times it's done much sooner than that. But I will say computer science, it will not be done in a couple of days. It will most likely be done in a week or a week and a half. But we do give that 2 weeks just to be on the safe side. Now for I-20s, the International Student Scholar Services Office, once they have all financial documentation and the student hits their system, because the student does not go to them unless financial documentations are complete, then they need 10 days. But there are times when they've issued I-20s within 24 hours, but maximum it will be 10 days.
awesome, thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that during both of those timeframes, students should really keep an eye on their emails, because those are both timeframes where they might get contact from us or ISSS requesting more information, asking for corrected documents, things like that. And that can cause holdups if they don't check in with us.
Definitely.
And since we're talking about already communication, Maddie, just you mentioned, there were a couple of students who asked about, they haven't received any receipt of their deposit payment. What's a typical timeline, or how is it being communicated to them once they pay the deposit?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that should appear right away. If they don't see it, it might be a situation where they have to check spam, or they can check in with us to maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the student portal, which is the application portal for the students, is really how we communicate really major things to the students, such as decisions, payments, anything like that for the deposit, that kind of thing. So that student portal, the students should be accessing it all the time. Once the payment is made, they will see on their student portal that this requirement has been satisfied.
Mhm.
And so they will see it there, that the payment has been received by Stevens.
Okay, that's awesome. So at least we can refer back to it, because I just saw a couple of students asking about the payment receipt and all that, but that's very helpful.
Absolutely. Now, of course, tuition payment is different.
Yeah.
So that's the enrollment deposit will only be on Slate on their student portal, on their application portal.
Mhm.
But tuition payments will be on their e-billing statements, which is under their My Stevens account.
Mhm.
Now, one thing I did not talk about, and I can't remember if I talked about it in detail, but Stevens just moved to Workday Student. And so please do understand that we have now, we're migrating the entire student information system, which is SIS. So anyone that has been in higher education knows that SIS is archaic. It has been in existence since many of us were probably born. And I used to use SIS back at the SUNY system in the early 1990s. So that's how long SIS has been around. So with that, we're migrating the entire student information system to Workday Student. So of course, There are glitches. There are things that the students are coming up for the students that seem weird. If a student deferred, for example, the student might receive a message that their record has been declined or that their record has been eliminated. That is only because we're now moving the student into a fall 2021 entry into Workday. So that's, there is a way for students to submit IT service tickets. And so if a student receives a message from their My Stevens account, that's because of that Workday migration. And they can submit a service ticket, and we can provide you with a link for those service tickets. The students can complete it, send it to IT. IT will resolve the issue and send the student notice on their My Stevens that it has been modified or the issue has been handled.
Yeah, awesome. So just to throw in a question from one of our team members. So if a student holding a scholarship missed a deposit deadline and then decides to confirm accept the offer after 30 to 35 days from the deadline, can we still be able to reinstate the scholarship?
Most likely not.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand that, of course, again, we reallocate this money to other students. And so I always feel that we will do everything we can for a student. But if a student is not willing to communicate with Stevens, and if a student is not willing to approach us about an issue they're having, or if they're just, if it's just sort of in the back of their mind and they're not concentrating on deadlines, that's not the kind of student we want. So it does have to be understood that we expect very diligent students at Stevens Institute of Technology. And I hate to say it, but these are all graduate students. So they do have a requirement to communicate with us. They do have a requirement to reach out before the deadline and say, I'm sorry, there's a problem that I'm having, and this is the reason I cannot pay this deposit. And we're fairly sensible people. I mean, and I'm sure you understand that, we also have to, we do enrollment management as well. And so filling our classrooms appropriately and figuring out the classroom spaces is very important for us. So we do have the expectations that the students will be conscientious and will be submitting, deposits and communications online. So again, we will not decline admission based on non-payment. But if a program fills up, as we talked about computer science or information systems, these are programs with very high demand. If there are no more classes to be had, we cannot allow a student who has not confirmed their program or their attendance at Stevens to still come. It hasn't happened yet. I mean, we still have, we just opened up additional sections perhaps for computer science and hired new faculty members, but it has to be understood that there will be a ceiling that we face. So please make sure that if your students have a deadline coming up soon, that the student and they're not able to pay the deposit, we must be contacted immediately.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dina.
Dina, could I ask one follow-up related to that one? When a student logs into their student portal, and let's say it's 33 days after they were admitted, so technically they've missed the deadline, would they still be able to see on their portal whether or not the scholarship has been reallocated or not? Or
They
is
cannot,
it kind of...
yeah,
okay.
they, because the deposit is tied to their admission, not to their scholarship, they will still be able to submit the deposit to confirm their admission, but they have to understand that it's not a way for them to also confirm
Gotcha.
their scholarship.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
I do see, sorry, Ryan. Now, I do see a question from Pankaj saying, does SIT send reminders to students? SIT sends enormous reminders to students about these deposits and about I-20 documentation. So in the student, and all of our communication is done through Slate, so through the student record. So, Brent, you will be able to also see perhaps all the communication that we also send out to the students.
One of our team members is asking, when can we expect a deferred offer letter to get received for fall 21 intake?
Probably those are spring admits
Yes, spring.
moving forward to fall. Yeah.
Maddie, do you have an update on that?
Yeah, so this is a process that we're sort of beginning now, and it should, the first sort of big round of spring 2021 to fall 2021 deferrals are being processed this week and next week. So your students should start seeing those letters rolling in the next couple of weeks. It's sort of a manual process, so it'll be not all in one big dump, it'll be a few at a time. So our goal is to have this all done by the first week of May for the ones that we currently have. So, you can sort of let students know over the next few weeks they can expect those letters. And they'll see, similarly to what we were doing previously for our fall 20 deferrals, they'll see a decline on their previous admit and then a new admit letter, just so they're aware.
Just a follow-up question on that, Maddie and Dina. So basically, these students, aside from the policy of deferring only for one semester, if they fall into that category, let's say they are originally admitted into spring 21 and then deferring to fall 21, is that a guaranteed admission already, or does it need to go through, let's say, another round of review?
You mean if they defer, from spring into fall, is it a guarantee that they're admitted to fall? Yes. Yeah, that's set.
Okay, awesome. And then I guess one question from my end that could also help us out in terms of, talking to students and yielding admits is that how, like in your expertise, a lot of students would apply to like 5 more universities aside from Stevens. How would you compare Stevens into, let's say, a university in Texas or maybe in New York City? Like, what's your best, in your perspective, what's the best topic to talk about when talking to students who has like rebuttals on those?
So I'll start, and then Maddie can continue if you want to add anything. I think, in my opinion, look, I'm somebody who worked for 4 different universities across my my career. Started out with the SUNY system and then proceeded to private universities. I think there's some key elements about Stevens that I really think an international student should be attracted to. Number one, and I know that a lot of universities use different methods to calculate the employability rate of their students. Okay, this is a given that I think, you have to figure out, a lot of universities. I was in a meeting with other universities the other day, and I was looking at this one university said they have a 95% employability rate. And then offline, I talked to the woman that was with me, and she said, oh, we only calculate it based on students that would be employable and then students that would be this and of course, at the end of the day, it's not 95% of their students are employed, so bottom line, I think one of the main things I would say at Stevens is that our employability rate of our students is through the roof. I mean, our management programs have 100% employability rate. Our computer science program has a 93% or 94% employability rate. And these are just going up and up. And the amazing thing is that these numbers actually were from last year when we were in the midst of the pandemic. So it just tells you that when we're not in the pandemic, our students find jobs. I keep losing my graduate assistants because they're all getting internships. They're all getting their CPTs. And of course, I do like to think that we prepare them well for those positions, but I think their employability rate is truly through the roof. Now, the other thing that I will say is the connection that our students are able to make with their faculty members. Stevens Institute of Technology has 50% of their students are graduate students, 50%. It's unheard of in a US institution. So that tells you that research is very important on our campus. Graduate students are getting services exactly like undergraduate students, which is really not the norm. It's not normal for a university, and not all universities go pick up their students from the airport or offer temporary housing in a 5-star hotel at $50 a night. So it tells you that the services that the graduate students will be getting on our campus, they will be handheld until they tell us, I don't need you to hold my hand anymore. Okay, so that's the other thing that I will say is very important. Now, of course, everybody talks about our closeness to New York City. Sometimes I roll my eyes at that because there's a lot of universities in New York City. There's a lot of new universities in the surrounding area, perhaps. But what I will say is that Hoboken itself is truly the best of both worlds. So I used to work in New York City, and definitely I will say that commuting to New York City from Hoboken is much easier than commuting from New York City to New York City. So 2 different points in New York City, I find it much easier to walk down 5 minutes, take the path, and be in many different areas in New York. Whereas if I'm having to take a subway in New York from one point to the other, forget about it. It could take me out like hours. So bottom line, Hoboken is truly a hub. It's a hub of transportation. It's a very affluent city, very affluent. That's why I'm telling you, a 1-bedroom apartment could go up to 2,600. So, you know, it's an amazing, beautiful city that people from outside come when they want to get away, because we have the Hudson, we have the skyline. So I think also our closeness to New York plays a huge role in the fact that we have such a close contact with industry. There's literally our faculty, we do hire from industry. They're PhD executives from industry that we go after and we hire at Stevens. So we do invest in them quite a bit. Maddie, did you wish to add any?
You covered so many good things. I don't want to add on too much, but I will just say, I think one thing for international students is, as a student and also in this area in New Jersey, international students won't feel alone. We have lots of international students. They're usually a majority of our graduate student body, and they're from all over the world. So you're not alone in your experience at Stevens when you're an international student. And also Hoboken and Jersey City, the neighboring city, are very diverse. And also just really great culturally in terms of the arts, food. You don't even need to go to New York for all of that, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think the other thing really quickly, because I am mindful of the time and everyone's time, I think the other thing is the interdisciplinary approach that we have at Stevens. We cater to the students' needs. So we always say that it was the associate dean that just left the associate deanship within the School of Business. He used to always say, every engineer ultimately becomes a manager. So we make sure that even our engineers do take the management courses and do take the analytics courses and do take the courses from the School of Business that they need in order to eventually excel. Now, we also have the option for students to combine a graduate certificate with a master's degree. So, and the graduate certificate does not have to be from the same program or the same school. It can be, the student can be in computer science, taking a School of Business graduate certificate as part of their electives. And this does not add to their time at Stevens, because what we do is we allocate their elective courses to make up the requirements for the graduate certificate. So when the student graduates, they're actually getting 2 degrees. They're getting the Master's of Science in Computer Science, and they're getting a graduate certificate in anything they want, essentially. Yeah.
Right. Dina, sorry, just for the sake of time, I wanted to ask one quick question for the both of you. Going back to the current events, number one is the COVID vaccine. While we're listening, we wanted to clarify with your statement, does that mean the vaccine is a requirement to be on campus, or it's not really required, but if ever that they don't have it, they can get it while they're here, once they arrive in the US.
Yeah, so this has not actually been clarified by senior administration yet. We are still working with the Department of Education and so on and so forth to get clarity, legal clarity on requiring the vaccine of our students. So this is not a requirement yet, but it looks like we are moving towards that. So it looks like we are moving towards requiring our students to have a vaccine to be on campus. And that is why we will be offering the students the vaccine. So if we require it, we will make sure that we have ways to give it to the students. Now, of course, the one piece of information that is still lacking from the information we received from the CDC and from the Homeland, from the Department of Education, is that what happens if a student has a vaccine that is not recognized by the United States? So that is the missing link in our information. And that is why we are not yet requiring it, because we don't know if a student can get vaccinated again.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this training today. It's been very, very helpful. I'm pretty sure our team have got a lot of information that will assist us in our yield process and initiatives. So again, thank you so much, Dina and Maddie. We really, really appreciate you.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I do appreciate you all. And I appreciate the work that you do for Stevens Institute of Technology. Please know that it has not gone unmentioned or unseen. It's definitely, we recognize how much work you do for Stevens, and we really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dina. Thanks, Maddie. I'll see you guys soon.
Okay, take care.
Thanks,
everybody.
Dina. Thanks, Maddie.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Everybody. Bye.